All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to our first episode of our podcast. We've got quite a bit of topics lined up. We're going to be talking about poll watching, voter intimidation, and just how the concepts of free and fair elections are sort of connected to free speech. And, when do you draw the line? So, Miles, you ready?
Yep.
All right. So, there's this, if you guys didn't know, there's a situation going down in Arizona, mostly Phoenix, I believe.
Yeah.
And people will do something called poll watching, and if you don't know, poll watching is when people get guns or another type of weapon and look over the polls to try and intimidate people and get them to vote differently. Some have said that it's to protect security because the government's not protecting security. That's usually people who support or maybe even actively do it. People who are against it say it's a violation of election policy, and it's a violation
And these
of
people
your rights.
and these people that are supporting the poll watching tend to be a bit more conservative, while the people who are against it are a bit more.
Yeah, people who are conservative are we have to protect elections at all costs. They're usually tend to support voting restrictions that make it harder for minorities to vote. At the cost of having less rigged elections potentially.
And then there are extremes who are pretty much just white males holding AKs with fascist
tattoos. There's full skinheads trying to get, usually in minority controlled areas, trying to get people not to vote.
Yeah. And this is way extreme, so it's not all.
This is way extreme. It's not everyone. Some people don't even use weapons. They just look over the polls and make sure in their eyes that everything's secure.
Yeah.
But let's dive into a little bit of the facts here. Miles, you've got the information sheet.
Yes. So, there were actually 43% of voters who were actually scared of the intimidation and threats from the polls, from these poll watchers that they call themselves. And then in the 2020 election, there are actually 267 poll watchers scared off.
You mean poll watchers that are scaring off voters?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
can see here, 40% of voters intimidated by poll watchers. That's, all these sources we'll put in the description, so you don't have to worry about that. But what are some implications of this? Well, minorities might be scared to vote. They might not get the representation that they need. And when we came up as a country, we cared most about representation. We said no taxation without representation. That's a quite famous line. And so this sort of takes us back to those roots. How authoritarian can we get? How much security? How important is security above freedom? I'm going to take a break here to pause, and then we'll begin the rest of our segment. All right, we're back here. Sorry about that delay. We were talking about the implications of voting restrictions.
And predictions,
And predictions for how things might occur. So, people might even miss the deadline. If you don't vote, you could miss the deadline.
Yeah.
Your vote might not be counted, and that's just unfair.
And then if this continues to happen and there are more and more voter intimidations, then there will be a huge chunk of people, or mostly minorities, which and then also actually it's also affecting younger people too?
Yeah, it mostly affects younger people.
Yeah. And then you're leaving out a huge chunk of people, which I guess is just not good.
Yeah, not good. So we try and keep it unbiased here on this channel. So we're going to talk about is there advantages to poll watching, Miles?
Let's see. Well, basically what they're saying is poll watchers keeps the voting a bit more secure.
Yeah. That's the point. If you're watching a poll worker, he's less likely to, stuff the ballot box.
Yeah. And like we said before, it's not all poll watchers are actually intimidating. Some of them are actually, doing their job.
Yeah, some of them are just looking,
Yeah.
Some people can still feel intimidated, but I don't think that's quite a violation of free speech.
And I think for the people who are intimidating, you can just, kick them out, but leave the people who are still just watching.
Yeah.
Doing nothing else. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we've covered that segment.
Okay, so next segment we're going to talk about what you can do to try to improve the poll watching and
Yeah, so if you have any particular take in this situation, what could you do to support it? Well, if you're against poll watching, you could submit bills. You could try and protest it. You could be like, "This is a violation of free and fair elections." That's what you could say. If you support it, you could be like, "Free speech should not be infringed. We're just trying to do our jobs." And maybe you could. It would look a lot better on you, if you were actually trying to do like if you were protesting that we need more voting security and restrictions, so that you didn't have to do it yourself.
And also, when you're making these statements or whatever, you need to have evidence. You can't just say all this stuff without evidence. And I think if you guys do have evidence, or if there was more evidence, it's more believable. Right?
Exactly. Don't try and if you're not 100% sure that there is voting fraud going on, I would say take a second, look at the evidence. Think about the evidence.
Yeah.
And then you can go ahead and make your decision then.
Yeah.
So our next topic is going to be voting restrictions, and people have been talking a lot about voting restrictions. What are voting restrictions?
There have been voting restrictions since when America was
since 1790.
Yeah, 1790. And it started with just rich white landowners.
Yeah, those were the only people who could vote, and for everyone else, they were disenfranchised. They couldn't vote. So there was voting restrictions on everyone except for white, rich landowners.
And then as we, gotten farther into,
as we grew as a country, we developed more and more equality. And so where are we now? We're in a place where everyone can vote, essentially.
That's what we like to
That's what we like to think. There's some states where you might not be able to vote because of certain issues. There's those people in Georgia, I believe, that they couldn't vote because there was only one polling station and they missed the deadline. And what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that more specifically, I mean, there is some problems with our democracy, and some people believe that voting security is more important than some people's ability to vote. But some people and some other people think that we should have no voting restrictions and that everyone should be able to vote. So you could be a criminal, you could be in trouble with the Department of Homeland Security for fraud or for a terrorist. You could be a terrorist, and these people still want you to be able to vote.
And I guess one example of this was during the Shelby County versus Holder. Basically, this allowed states to create their own voting policies. And before, if they wanted to change, in 1965, they created Section 5? Was it Section 5? I think.
It was the Voting Rights Act, and that had something where whenever a state wanted to change a law, it had to go up to the federal. It had to be signed by the federal government, and that's been removed in Shelby v. Holder. So Texas could go along and be like, make a new law that could inconvenience a minority group, and the federal government doesn't have to approve that first.
And these states that were mostly affected by it were the states that had a history of
disenfranchisement and racial injustice. So we've gone into detail about voting restrictions, poll watching, and voter intimidation. I think. So what are your closing thoughts, Miles? Do you have any?
I think. I guess one suggestion is whenever you're reading the news, try to get both sides of the argument.
Yeah, and that's what we try to do on the channel. So if you want to see more content that's sort of unbiased, or show both sides, both opinions, then you can subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and that would greatly aid your ability to get good information. Yes. I know I sound like a broken record. I know you've heard it a million times, but subscribing with notifications on is the best way to get unbiased news from our channel.
Please.
Yeah, please. All right, leave a comment below if you have any we love feedback. Leave a comment below if you have like any thoughts and opinions on these topics.
And then
Bye-bye.
Pink Gators, my Detroit players. Tim's for my hooligans in Brooklyn. Dead right, if they head right, Biggie there every night. Papa been smooth since days of under rules. Never lose, never choose to. Bruise, cruise, who? Do something to us. Talk, go through us.